Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Each episode features conversations about emerging trends and news that affect the death care industry. We talk to people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, I am speaking with Shawn'te Harvell. He is the new president of the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association, and they are celebrating their 100th year of existence this year. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal for him, it's a big deal for them, and it's a big deal for the industry at large. What's particularly interesting is Shawn'te is a younger guy, and he talks very much as we spoke in the last episode, which was with Sanchez Burns Turner. We talk about the combination of youth and age that work together to keep this organization functional and so enthusiastic. He's got some great plans for the future. He's got some great ideas, and he's going to have a great presidency, and we wish him well. He won't need any luck, but we want to say we saw it coming when he does such a great job in the coming year. We also talk about his own personal rise to stardom as a first-generation funeral director. As always, remember, you can reach out to me with questions, comments, and suggestions at arusso@kbpublications.com. That's arusso@kbpublications.com. A link to that in the show notes. Actually, a link to everything we do in the show notes. So the show notes are a great place to get a start. Remember, please stay on after for the postmortem. All right, well, let's get to this conversation with Shawn'te after this message from our sponsor, Homesteaders Life Company. What if you could purchase caskets and urns at prices from 10 years ago? With the Casket Price Protection Plan, an exclusive partnership between Matthews Aurora and Homesteaders Life Company, you can. We know fluctuations in the economy threaten your funeral home's already shrinking profit margin. Finding ways to control cost without impacting your quality of service to client families is top of your mind. Fortunately, the Casket Price Protection Program, also known as P3, creates long-term savings for you as a funeral provider and security for your client families. This solution allows you to lock in the current wholesale cost of a Matthews Aurora casket or urn on a qualifying Homesteaders-funded policy, avoiding the added cost of price increases. We will even roll back the original wholesale cost an additional 2% at the time of death. If you want a solution to help create financial security, contact your Homesteaders account executive or visit homesteaderslife.com/P3 today. That's homesteaderslife.com/P3. So I know that you are not, I don't believe they're the youngest ever elected president, but you're among the youngest presidents and among one of the series of presidents from New Jersey that has kind of taken on this mantle. So can you talk about how the young aspect of the NFD&MA plays into your presidency and other presidencies and participation, like in general?
Sure. Being among one of the youngest, I think now it's a transitional period to where I believe it was Dr. Harry Close. He was giving one of his president's addresses, and he said that I may be the last gray-headed president that you all may have.
That's great.
Because our president now, because Harry Close is now the chair of the board, the president now, who's Mr. George Durham Jr., he's only a year older than me.
Yeah, he's a young guy. I met him.
Yep, he's a young guy as well. And then here I am, a little younger than him. And so our organization is pretty much transcending to, gravitating to younger people in leadership versus a lot of organizations to where you see, okay, it's pretty much the same age range that's leading the organization, where now we're at an attrition cliff to where, wow, We went from, I believe, Harry's in his 60s to now the two presidents that preceded him are in their 40s.
Right. And I wonder, do you think that has to do with how funeral service in general is changing and like the new, because there are a lot of, because you're a first generation
Yes.
funeral director,
Yes.
right? And that's becoming more common. And you guys you're not waiting for your fathers or mothers to be finished before you start because they're not in the business yet.
Right. As a whole, if you look at the industry as a whole, it's a lot of first generationers, and even in the on the school and schooling aspect. When you look at the makeup of mortuary schools, the classes now versus when I was in mortuary school, you have first generationers that are pretty much the majority of that class, if not all of it.
Mm.
Now, I believe out of all the classes I have now, I maybe have one or two classes where there's a funeral director's child in that group. Everyone else is first generationers, you know, and that could be to the makeup of that. When you look at funeral service, even my daughter told me right off the bat, I'm not going to be a funeral director. I don't want to be a funeral director. That's my oldest daughter. Now, my youngest daughter, she wants to be a funeral director.
Right.
But my
And
oldest daughter said, "Oh no," and she had her reason. She said, "Daddy, we'll be in the mall and families are calling, and then we have to leave the mall, or we'll be sitting down at dinner, and you have to get up and you have to go. I don't want to do that."
and I think it's cool on a level to not feel like you have to do that. I wonder how much that has to do with this injection of young life into funeral service is not feeling like you're picking up a family's burden, but feeling like you're going out on your own and doing something that you want to do.
Right. And you know what else has played a very intricate role in the dynamics on how funeral services changed? The consumer
Mhm.
changed.
And
Okay.
talk about that a little bit.
Let's talk about maybe 15, 20 years ago, right? It was unheard of that you would have the wake and funeral and burial all in one day.
Mm,
Before,
right.
oh no, we had to have the visitation the evening prior. It would be 2 to 4, 7 to 9, and then we would have the funeral and followed by burial, right?
Right.
Now, it's like, no, 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 no. We can do the viewing an hour before the service. We'll have the service and off to the burial we go. Or after that, we'll cremate, right? And
Mhm.
so now the consumer needs are different than they were before. If you look at the consumer makeup, when they come to make arrangements now, before, if you look at a lot of funeral directors, and we discussed this amongst our group a lot, that you would be dressed up, shirt and tie. The family would come in, they would make arrangements and all that good stuff. Now, the family, you don't even have to be dressed up anymore.
Right.
you know, as and one of my colleagues, he said the family told him one time, "We're happy you didn't come here in a suit."
Because you put them, people maybe feel like they're already kind of being pushed
Right,
to elevate.
right. They were more comfortable with what he had on versus him having on a shirt, tie, full suit, and all of that good stuff, right?
Mm,
And now, even the virtual aspect. I did an article in 2007 and it was called The Millennial Consumer as it relates to funeral service. And I talked about the virtual aspect and the streaming aspect and all of that good stuff. And a lot of individuals who read that article was like, we don't know about that or what happened.
right.
And what happened? COVID happens, right? And now COVID has taught us that we don't even have to be physically there to be a part of the experience. We can actually experience it from the comfort of our homes, to the point that I had a family during COVID who sent me the clothes, shipped me the clothes. They never came to the funeral home period. We did
Wow.
arrangements virtually. They sent me the clothing. They viewed virtually, had a virtual service with a minister and everything. And I took the remains to be buried. And they got to see that virtually. And so funeral service has changed a lot. And COVID has told us that even a lot of our needs as families, we don't need, the limousines and so forth and so on. Now that has cut back. Families said, no, we can drive our own cars.
Adapting to these changes I'm sorry, let me put it this way. Do you think adapting to these changes is a young person's game? Like, since the younger folks don't necessarily have this kind of built-in expectation, or can you get past those expectations more easily if you haven't been doing them for as long? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
Yes. So, my aunt, who affectionately I call my aunt, we're not blood related, but this funeral home, when I came, didn't even have a website, right?
Right.
And she, wasn't really tech savvy and all of that. And we got the website. And once we got it, it was like this new thing for her where she would stay on the website all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a conversation about the website and all that good stuff because what I let her know was I'm a millennial, okay? Gone are the days where families will come to your funeral home as far as like a walk-in,
Right,
ring your
right,
doorbell to talk about arrangements or to price shop or to ask questions. No, what we as millennials will do is we'll go on the internet and we will pull up your funeral home just like we pull up any other information when we want to,
right,
as consumers, right? And we will see everything you have to offer. We'll see if your website is user friendly. We'll see, all of the information that we can get about your services. And then when we call you, we will more or less interview you.
right. You've already know what the prices are. You want to see what the other
Right.
kind of stuff is.
So it will be more like an interview before we even make the decision to even leave our homes to come to visit you. So
And again, this is still before COVID too.
and this was before COVID, right? In other words, you may miss out on a call because if you don't have a website, you automatically are disqualified. If your website is not user friendly, that may disqualify you as well. And if they don't feel that they're getting the information they want, they may not go a step further. And then, you know how we are as consumers now, we want to see the reviews.
Right.
Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so that whole dynamic now, if you didn't get with the program or you haven't gotten with the program, then you're going to lose out because the way the consumer thinks now is different. Just think my grandparents, when they selected a funeral home, they went to the funeral home that they always used. Good, bad, indifferent, didn't matter. We
Right.
always went to this firm. We're going to always go to that firm just out of tradition to where now we don't have any loyalty to one set firm.
Mm-hmm.
If we see this firm meets our needs today, that's where we go. If we experience a death a couple of years down the road, we'll up and change firms.
Yeah, just look again. You have to look. It's not like something else where it's always on your mind and it's not like the grocery store where you go every week and it can become a habit
Right.
every time it's new.
Absolutely.
Hi, I want to take a second to let you know that awards season has come to Kates-Boylston, and we are coming up to the end of the nomination period. August 16th is your last chance to nominate a funeral director of the year or to nominate a cemetery for the American Cemetery Excellence Award. For funeral home owners, managers, and employees, it's a good opportunity to look around at your colleagues and see who the person is who makes you glad to be a funeral director. And in cemeteries, it's an opportunity to take a look around and to see what's good about your cemetery, what makes you proud to work at the cemetery where you work. We always make a huge deal out of the winners. They get a cover and they get a plaque and they get to walk around and say that they are the funeral director of the year or that they run the cemetery of the year as decided by America's premier publications covering these industries. As I mentioned, the nomination process comes to an end in just a little under a month, so visit Kates-Boylston.com or check the show notes and click on the link to the most appropriate award. And good luck. I can't wait to see what you guys send in. I wanted to talk a little bit about you mentioned the funeral home where you are now, because you had a kind of a meteoric rise into your current position. So can you talk about how you got this job and some of the other ways you kind of transformed?
Okay. So I'm at Smith Funeral Home now in Elizabeth, New Jersey. However, I got my start in funeral service as a 16-year-old at Perry Funeral Home in Newark, which is a rather large and at that time was very large firm.
Mm.
I was 16 years old, a kid from Bound Brook, entering funeral service. From there, I decided that I was going to go to mortuary school. So I ended up going to AAMI, to American Academy of McAllister Institute of Funeral Service. It was there that I was in my third semester, and there was a funeral home in the Bronx called McCall's Bronxwood Funeral Home. And they were very smart. They were very smart and very, at that time, on the cutting edge, because what they would do is they would interview and recruit right out of the mortuary school.
They
Okay.
wouldn't wait for people to come to them. They'd go to the schools.
Right. And so it was a funeral director by the name of Patricia Myers, who I was introduced to her by a funeral director. And I went there for an interview, and I started working there fresh out of mortuary school. And I worked there for 13 years. 2 years of me being there, I became the assistant manager. And I worked there up until I came here to Smith Funeral Home. And how I got to Smith Funeral Home, because, of course, Miss Yvonne Smith, her brother is my godfather. And we always had a connection. And this is from when I was small, little kid.
Mm.
And she affectionately called me her nephew, and I would refer to her as my aunt. Ironically, she had two deceased individuals who died in New York within like a 4-day span. So when I went to go and do the transfers for her, when I came, she would tell me, she says, well, I need help. And so in my mind, I said, oh, no problem. If you need me to come in and embalm, I can do that. Or take out a service for you, I can do that. And she said, that's not what I'm talking about. So I'm just like, oh, okay. So I didn't go any further. So the second transfer for her, we were standing in the preparation room, and she says, I'm going to need your help. So I said, no problem. I can come through and embalm and stuff. She said, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm looking for someone to come and pretty much manage the funeral home and all that good stuff. So I said, oh, like that. Then she said, you know what? This is what we're going to do. She says, I want to bring me everything that that they offer you there. Whatever you're getting there, I want the whole kit and caboodle, right?
Right.
So I'm like, okay. And so I really didn't think none of it. So I just gave her everything, from the salary I was getting and benefits and all that. And I sent it to her. And so she called me over to the funeral home, and she says, okay. She says, well, at the time, she says, I'm 60 years old. She says, I'm really not looking for a manager. I'm really looking for somebody who's going to take the funeral home over. She says, because I'm at the place right now to where in 5 years, I'm out of here.
Right.
He says, I've been doing this. I've been here 40 years. Now it's time for me to, enjoy the rest of my life, And she says, and this was very important, that really resonated with me. She says, I have taken Smith Funeral Home as far as I could. Now it's time for someone else to take it to the next level.
Wow.
And sure enough, she told me, you need to give them your 2 weeks and let them know you're coming to New Jersey. And sure enough, that's what happened. 5 years later, well, it's over 5 years since I've been here now, but 5 years, she was absolutely right. I was sitting here one day, and next thing I know, she said, I'm leaving. I have a home in Florida now and all that good stuff. Goodbye. It's on you now, buddy. And that was that. And that's as far as my rise, as far as my career path. And in between all of this, I teach mortuary school at both mortuary colleges in New Jersey, which thankful to my mentor, Kyle Ledford, who is the program director at Eastwood College, as well as Geralda Alderjust, who is the program director at Mercer County Community College. Those are two relationships that I had for over 20 years. Mr. Ledford and I knew each other, I believe, all my life, because he's older than me, so I always say that. And Mrs. Alderjust and I, we known each other over 20 years as well. So not only do I practice here as far as being the funeral director and manager of Smith Funeral Home, I have my own trade service because I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey, which is called Legacy Funeral Service. I am the adjunct professor at 2 different mortuary colleges. And on top of all of that, I have time, or I make time rather, to make sure that I'm a part of my associations, whether it be our local, which is Garden State Funeral Directors Association, whether it's the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association, or whether it's the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association. I
That's
always have time to do my due diligence and be a part of our associations. It was actually, and I always reminisce because my best friend Ryan Buckland, who's a funeral director, there was a meeting and he and I think I was about 30, 31 years old. Ryan was about 32, 33. And we had an association meeting at Dr. E. Churchman Funeral Home in Newark. Unbeknownst to he and I, which is going to answer your question about my rise in the association. We get to the meeting and they're voting, and they voted that night for Ryan to become the president and for me to become the vice president. Little did we know from that evening, that from that moment, that it will turn into where we are now. We were in those positions. We served actually 2 terms, and they would have let us keep serving, but we decided that we were going to come out.
right, and get some fresh blood.
Right. Once we came out of that capacity, I served 2 terms as the district governor for District 1 in the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association. Toward the end or middle of that, where we sit in meetings, we sit behind the past presidents of the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association. And I'll never forget, a few of them turned around because it was an election year coming up.
Uh-huh.
And they turned around, and Ryan and I just happened to have been sitting behind them. And they said, well, it's y'all turn. So Ryan thought quick on his feet. I was a little slow. Ryan said, well, I don't have the time because my wife won't let me. So I'm looking at him like, well, you didn't even ask your wife. Well, so then that just left me. And I guess I couldn't think of a reason fast enough. And so I thought about it and I thought about it and I thought about it. And I said, well, I guess I'll give it a shot. And so I ran for vice president. I ended up running unopposed, and I still, ran a campaign and all of that. And I was elected vice president. And here we are at the end of my vice presidency, moving up to the president's role and running again unopposed as the national president of the organization. And I take nothing for granted, especially being at the helm of an 100-year-old association that started in 1924.
Yeah, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
And my other thing was just for the, that's an honor in and of itself, to be able to lead an association that's been around that long.
Along those lines, like, what are your hopes for the coming year? Like, not necessarily your agenda, but like is there anything big picture you would really like to say 12 months from now that you kicked off or that you got done or something like that?
I guess my central focus with the association, and there was an article in it, and it talked about it looking for, right? I'm big on relationships, especially relationships and mentorships between younger funeral directors and seasoned funeral directors. Notice I didn't use the word older funeral directors.
Right.
Because I live by this thing to where I love free wisdom. I don't want to pay for experience.
Right.
The young, we have the energy, we have the drive, we have the tech savvy know-how. But our seasoned funeral directors, they have that wisdom. They've been down some of these roads that we're going to go down, and some of them can be of a detriment. But if you sit down and you listen to them, it'll keep you from making some of the wrong turns.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, funerals still have a traditional aspect to them. There's a foundation to them. Now, where you go after the foundation, now we can argue that's now it changes, right? Generational changing and all of that good stuff. And social media has played a large role on the outlook of funerals and the funeral industry as well. That we have to deal with, that our seasoned funeral directors didn't have that component, when they were developing and growing their business. They didn't have to worry about social media. They were just doing the newspaper, right?
Right. Yeah.
So my thing is just transcending and bringing us, bringing new ideas and having an open mind and being receptive to some things that are uncomfortable to us on both sides.
Hmm.
As trends grow in funeral service, as we hire funeral directors, right? Because new funeral directors or new hirees do not look like how we look.
Right.
You talk about the earrings or the tattoos or the different color hair and all of that good stuff. And I had a conversation with students and some funeral directors, and I had an opportunity to let them know that we may frown upon, oh, well, that student has tattoos or she has different color hair. But when you look at who you're sitting in front of when you have your families, those are the people that you're sitting in front of.
Right.
And guess what? That student will be able to identify and connect because they look the same now. Who would have ever thought a slim, Black African American guy with locks in his hair would lead a traditional organization?
Yeah, I guess.
Right?
Yeah, but you wear them real well, to be honest.
Right. And you know what? I was told that when I first was starting to wear them, Mr. Arnold, he said, listen, he said, if you're going to wear it, it needs to be kept up. And that's been my thing. If you're going to wear something, it's fine to wear it, but you have to keep it up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make this about how great your hair is, but no one, you're dressed, however you're dressed, doesn't matter. Everybody knows from your hair that you're a serious person. Like,
Right.
like, oh, that guy, you're just put together. Your hair says whatever else comes under the hair. I am a put together dude.
Right. And that's it. You got to keep yourself together. I always say that when families look at you and they see that you're a well put together guy, they will always say, wow, you know what? I have no worries of what my loved one going to look like, because if he can put himself together that well, I'm quite sure he can put our loved ones together very well.
Well, we are kind of coming up against it, so I do want to ask you a final question. Is there anything you didn't get a chance to say that you thought you would? Something I should have asked and didn't be?
Yes, I always talk about, and I always joke with everybody because I say, as I get older, I get more emotional when I talk about friendships. And I told you I'm big on relationships. And I always like to refer to the fact that Shawn'te Harvell did not get to where he got to on his own.
Mm.
And I talk about none of us are self-made, although people like to use that phrase, I'm self-made. Someone helped you get to where you got,
Yeah.
right? And I've always paid homage to our local association, Garden State, because it was those funeral directors that pushed me and encouraged me, and they support me all the way up until now to be the best that I can be. The 23rd president of the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association was a gentleman by the name of Carney Bragg Sr., who owned a funeral home in Patterson. And here we are. I will be the 69th president, the second one to hail from New Jersey. And that's an accomplishment, and I'm proud. And I don't take it as far as me being proud of myself. I think my state, they're very proud of that.
Yeah.
And the members of the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association, I owe a gratitude to them because it's an international association, and it's full of a bunch of great individuals, great funeral directors, great mentors, and great leadership there, which they have developed me as well. And I owe my gratitude to the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association, because not only did they pour into me as well, but they gave an opportunity for me to lead those great people, them as a great organization.
Excellent. And that is all I have for you. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
What if you could purchase caskets and urns at prices from 10 years ago? With the Casket Price Protection Plan, an exclusive partnership between Matthews Aurora and Homesteaders Life Company, you can. We know fluctuations in the economy threaten your funeral home's already shrinking profit margin. finding ways to control cost without impacting your quality of service to client families is top of your mind. Fortunately, the Casket Price Protection Program, also known as P3, creates long-term savings for you as a funeral provider and security for your client families. This solution allows you to lock in the current wholesale cost of a Matthews Aurora casket or urn on a qualifying homesteaders funded policy, avoiding the added cost of price increases. We will even roll back the original wholesale cost an additional 2% at the time of death. If you want a solution to help create financial security, contact your homesteader's account executive or visit homesteaderslife.com/P3 today. That's homesteaderslife.com/P3. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. I've already said it, but I'll say it again. Please make sure you check out the show notes, because that is where you can get in touch with us. That's where you can find links to all of the stories we referenced. Links to the story. I actually did a nice little profile on Shawn'te and on Sanchez Burns Turner, and those are in a recent Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. If you've not subscribed to the newsletter, I'd like to make it worth it every week. I try really hard to make it worth your time and your effort, so consider subscribing. But if not, there are also plenty of free stories on Kates-Boylston.com, and you should check them out once you get a sense of really just how much there is to know about funeral service, just other things that you may not come across in your day-to-day. This is the place where, if it's worth reading, we have it on Kates-Boylston.com, and you should check it out so that you know about it. But as to the podcast, we are available wherever you're listening now. We are available on Spotify. We're available on Apple. We're available on Amazon. If you can hear this, you can subscribe to it. And if you subscribe to it where you're listening now, then you can listen to it whenever it comes out, which is every other week. For this week's postmortem, I want to talk about the coming school year. Over the next couple weeks, we'll be running both in FSI and here on the podcast stories about mortuary school. So if you're not a funeral director and you're listening to this because you're interested in maybe becoming a funeral director, the September issue of American Funeral Director is going to have a ton of really cool mortuary school stuff in it. The next 2 episodes we're going to run are going to be involved with the expectations of mortuary school, and then we're going to speak with Jennifer Floyd, who runs a mortuary at a mortuary school, and it's like a place where their students work to get all of the experience they need. Over the next couple weeks and months, probably, we're going to talk about the embalming question and how it's becoming more difficult to get embalming practice as more students enroll and fewer bodies to embalm are available for practice, and that kind of disconnect. And also, we're going to start taking part anyway in the conversation about whether or not and to what degree embalming should be mandatory to get a funeral director's license. It's a hot button issue and it's complex. It is certainly more complex than yes and no, but it's something that we need to think about. We need to do some reporting on it because you guys as an industry really have to have a good sense of what is at stake and why nationally, as well as in your individual states, if you are in one of the increasingly fewer states that requires embalming of its funeral directors. But that is all for this week. Please enjoy the rest of your summer. We will be back just before Labor Day weekend with our next show on schools, and then it will be Labor Day weekend, and then it will be the fall, and then it will be Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's practically New Year as I record this on July 31st. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.